worthy.
From the Sunshine State, this is Tampa Bay's Tan Talk.
It's time for FLALAW, brought to you by the personal injury attorneys of Perenich, Caulfield, Avril Noyes. This hour will be informative, along with taking your questions and comments. Now, here are your hosts for today's show.
That's right. We are back live with FLALAW live on the radio. Thank you for joining us for our live legal call-in talk show that is hosted by, you guessed it, the law firm of Perenich, Caulfield, Avril Noyes. To our faithful listeners, thank you for coming back every Tuesday at 5 o'clock. And for those that are new, thank you for joining us tonight. This is a live legal call-in talk show where you're able to call in with your legal questions and also listen to interesting legal topics that we have every Tuesday at 5 o'clock. As you may know, my name is Jacqlyn Bryant, and I'm one of the personal injury attorneys at Perenich, Caulfield, Avril Noyes. And tonight I have the pleasure of being here with my partner and colleague, Matthew Noyes.
Hello, Jacqlyn.
Hopefully you already know, everyone should know him by now, but he's in the hot seat today because I'm hosting and he's going to be answering your questions tonight, of course, with my commentary as well. So thank you for joining me, Matt. I don't think we've had a show together in quite a while.
I know. We were talking about it a few days ago. It was like, I think last time we did it was one of our first shows.
Probably. I know.
So it's good to be here. It feels good to be the guest instead of the host. That's for sure.
We are joining forces. Our powers combined tonight.
That's right.
You've got two legal minds to call in and ask questions. And I think it'll be a fun show. We got some fun questions. We're going to kind of rapid fire with Matt tonight. But before we do that, I am going to give you all the details on how you can call in if you'd like. Also, how you can continue to watch. We know that everyone's busy and hopefully you're listening live on the radio. But of course, we can also continue to watch through our streaming platforms that I'll mention. And then you can also listen to us later on and check out some of our older past shows on our podcast. So first things first, if you're interested in the topic that we're talking about tonight, you have any questions you'd like to come call in, or if you just want to comment and you have something you'd like to add to the discussion, the best way to reach us is to call into the studio tonight at 727-441-3000. That's the call-in number that'll get you into the studio, and the lines are open. So that's 727-441-3000. If you'd like to watch us online and see us in the studio, we are streaming on Facebook and YouTube. So how you find us is to search our firm name, Perenich, Caulfield, Avril Noyes Injury Lawyers. If you search that in the search bar of either of those platforms, whether it's Facebook or YouTube, you'll be able to find us. You should see the red circle around our logo that lets you know that we are live. Click on that, and then you'll see Matt and I here in the studio. If you're a little bit shy and you want to just have your questions in the chat box, you can do that as well. I'll see them when they pop up, and you'll be able to drop them there, and I'll read them out as we go throughout the show this evening. But if you want to go back later, let's say, unfortunately, you had to jump out of the car, pick up the kids or whatnot, you can certainly finish watching the show later. The show will be posted later on our podcast. And we are pretty much where you consume podcasts, just about every platform. It's Spotify, iHeartRadio, and
Apple
Podcasts. Thanks for the assist there. So if you've got an iPhone, you should automatically have Apple Podcasts. Just search FLALAW live on the radio, and you should be able to find us. I encourage you to follow us. That way you can get all the shows and listen to them at your leisure. With that being said, I always start my show with a little bit of shout out to our firm, who is celebrating the 70th anniversary this year. And I want to continue to promote that because it is a major, major milestone. But a lot of law firms cannot attest to being in business, serving clients and helping those that have been injured for that many years. Right, Matt?
That's for sure. We are the oldest or most established personal injury law firm in Tampa Bay.
Absolutely. So with that being said, I have done this for Bryant and Lori, but I have not asked you just yet. But when we think about the 70th anniversary, it does give us an opportunity to be a bit nostalgic and kind of stroll down memory lane, if you will. And so I want to ask you if there's anything that, as you think about your time with the firm over the years, that just stands out in your mind that you'd like to share? Because I know, just like myself, you've kind of been with the firm your entire legal career. And so there's a lot to draw on, I'm sure. But there's something that stands out that you'd like to share in celebration of our 70th anniversary?
Sure. I've been with the firm now for almost 35 years now. Yeah. And so I remember I started out as a legal assistant. Mm-hmm. I was going to get my undergrad, and then I went to law school while I was still a student and an employee at the law firm. And I remember my first day perfectly when I went for the job interview. I went at about 6 o'clock at night, and I'm sitting in the dark lobby because the lights are off, and here comes this short, older guy coming in and says, "Oh, so what are you here for?" And I said, "I'm here for an interview." And he had cowboy boots on. He stuck his hand out, shook my hand, and was just the nicest person that I didn't expect, really. And it turned out it was Guy Perenich. Right. And Guy sat and talked to me for a little while, and then he went into the interview, and he said, "I like that guy. Let's hire him."
Got the stamp of approval.
And I've been there ever since. And so that's one of the best memories I have of Guy. As for our clients, we used to have, this is dating ourselves, when the Moss Brothers was downtown at Coachman Park in the library, we would always have, it was the Client Fun Fest. And we would have bands, we would have circus animals come at petting zoo, and it was just a whole bunch of fun. We had 700 people come of our clients just to celebrate their dedication to us. So that was always a great opportunity to do that.
And fun fact, I actually had a client come back that I helped out in one of his cases, and he told me that his mom used to be the clown that would come to those fests.
Oh, my goodness.
I don't know if she did like balloon animals, or maybe it was face painting. I'm not sure, but she would dress up as a clown. And she's like, my mom used to be the clown for your client events. I was like, oh, wow.
That's very cool.
So that was before my time, but that is actually pretty cool. So
oddly, I found a shirt in one of my drawers that are from the Fun Fest. So I wish I could say I could still fit into it. But maybe I'll bring it in one day for nostalgic purposes.
It in a museum.
That's right. That's right.
That's great. That's an awesome memory. And I thank you for sharing that. And of course, if there's any clients listening and you'd like to comment on any memory that you have with the firm, we'd love to hear it. With that being said, like I said, Matt is in the hot seat tonight. He's stepping back as host and answering some questions that I think will be very interesting, entertaining for our listeners this evening. And we'll be going into auto, workers' comp, and personal injury in general. Maybe we'll touch on Social Security disability, but mostly the auto cases and PI cases, which really is the lion's share of what we do at our firm. And so there's always topics that I think come up, but there's also a lot of issues that people maybe don't necessarily ask. And I think it's beneficial to have, an experienced seasoned attorney like yourself give your take on some of these things, right?
I appreciate that. Yeah, a lot of our clients don't know what questions to ask until it happens.
Absolutely. And so I hope to ask these in a fun and interesting way. So with that being said, let's start out with what's one thing you wish every driver in the state of Florida knew about car accidents?
That's a good question.
Yeah.
I guess what I really wish drivers knew was that they need to be careful. Yeah. Because if they're not careful, a car accident can forever change somebody's life. And so was that checking the cell phone, or was that speeding, or trying to beat that yellow light? Was it worth it?
Yeah.
To run the risk of changing somebody's life forever?
Yeah, and we just saw something just recently. I want to say, I can't remember the road, but it was right in Clearwater, sadly. Like a 4-year-old boy, 10-year-old boy, and then a grandparent, I think they were in their 70s, have all passed away for something, similar of, maybe someone was turning the wrong way, or there was the speed as a factor. I don't know that we'll know all the details. But 3 people lost their lives,
right?
in an instant. And so it's very sad.
It's devastating. I mean, young children dying. That was
very much so.
Sad.
And that's local. So it hits home. But we see that kind of thing all the time. And so I think that's actually a really, really good tip
Yeah, I think
for
the other
Florida
driver
drivers.
was a football player
Yeah,
for Miami
I think for
Hurricanes.
Miami. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah, so that's going to obviously have a huge impact on him and his life moving forward.
Sure.
Very, very sad all around. And if you're in the state of Florida, you have to be careful on these highways and byways and the roads that we're on. And so that brings me to my next question. One of our main highways is I-275.
Yeah.
So my question to you is, if you had a billboard on I-275 giving legal advice in 5 words or less, what would it say?
Let me see if I can do it in 5 words.
For those who are on the radio, he's counting his fingers.
My fingers. I think it may be 6 words. They have attorneys, so should you.
Yeah.
That's 6 letters. Insurance companies are already building their case against you from the time that you contact them. So it's important that you level the playing field and get an attorney. At least talk to an attorney. You may not have to retain somebody, but at least talk to an attorney to get advice about what to do after the crash. Yeah,
and we do that all the time. We don't necessarily have a contract or a retainer with every single person we meet with. Sometimes people are just looking for answers, and they need some sort of guidance, and then they realize, I don't necessarily need an attorney after speaking to us, but a lot of times they do. I would say the majority of the time when they come in and they go over the facts and they understand what they're up against, they realize that they do need to proceed with a case, and that's usually what we can help folks with.
And there's many times, I have seen that we have talked to people and we said that they didn't really need us at that time. And because we took the time to talk to them and we gave them the advice that or the answers that they needed, they came back later and trusted us because
absolutely right.
We were able to help them the first time.
Yeah. So if I had to shorten it down, I'd say car crash, call us. That's right. That would be my billboard.
I always think, don't trust, but verify.
That's a good one too.
Don't trust the adjuster. Don't believe what they have. Don't believe always what they say. Verify it first. Talk to somebody, see if what they're saying is correct. Just this week, I talked to a prior client of mine who came in for an auto accident, and she was talking to me. She said, "Well, I got a check for $4,000."
Yeah.
But they told me I still had $10,000 available.
Yeah, but where's that coming from?
Yeah, and that's the adjuster. And so I was like, well, I think you settled your case without knowing you settled your case. She goes, no. They told me I had $10,000 still. And sure enough, they emailed her a release. She e-signed it. They sent her the money, and she, in fact, settled her case. So you can't always trust what the adjuster's saying. She was right.
I was going to say she did have $10,000, but it wasn't coming from them.
Yeah, it wasn't coming from them. So always at least talk to an attorney, especially before you sign any documents or e-sign any documents. That's even worse.
Yeah. And there's one, I won't name, but there's one particular carrier that comes to mind that tends to do that. And I've seen recently where they even just flat out told the client before they came to me, you don't need an attorney. There's no need for you to hire a lawyer. This case is pretty straightforward. I'm sure we can just work it out together. And there's some people that might think that's true and say, oh, okay, not realizing that they've just now accepted a settlement that was far less than what the case would have actually been worth, and doesn't really account for all the future medical care and treatment and injuries and things that will come up down the line.
You never know what your injuries are 24 hours after the crash. Right. Your adrenaline's flowing.
Yeah.
And you're masking whatever problems. So maybe, hopefully, none develop, but oftentimes once adrenaline slows down, you start having those pains.
Yep, and it's not impossible, but it is very difficult to then go back and try to get out of that. Most cases where there's a signed release, that's going to stand, and you can't say, "Well, I didn't realize," or "I didn't know," or "Now I need a surgery." Unfortunately, that's usually the end of the road.
So don't trust, verify.
Right. So that kind of brings a good segue to the next question then. What, Matt, do you feel is a common myth that people tend to believe about injury law or personal injury cases that just drives you crazy?
I think
Just grind your gears.
I think we try to talk about it every week because it is so prevalent in people's mind. They think they have full coverage when they don't have full coverage, or oh, don't worry, the person who hit me said they have full coverage.
Yeah,
and I just cringe because full coverage to them is not full coverage to us.
Never full coverage.
Not at all. And that's why uninsured motorist coverage is so important, because full coverage in the state of Florida is really just two things.
That's what I was just about to ask. What is full coverage?
Yeah, full coverage in the state of Florida, to be following the law, you have PIP coverage and you have property damage coverage.
Right.
You don't have any liability coverage, bodily injury liability coverage, that would compensate someone that you cause injury to.
Exactly right. And I think it's a common mistake that people just automatically assume, and I understand why they do, rightfully so, is that I was hurt due to the negligence of some other party, and there just has to be a way for that person to be held accountable. And there just has to be a way for me to be able to make a recovery. And unfortunately, that is not true.
That's true. I mean, I have a client right now who's in that same situation. The person who caused the crash that she was in was arrested because he was driving with a suspended license and he had other issues with him. And so he had to spend, I think it was 17 days in jail or something like that. Unfortunately, she didn't have uninsured motorist coverage. Fortunately, the owner of the vehicle did have $10,000, but her injuries are worth far more than $10,000. She just doesn't understand, that
the limitations.
The limitations of the insurance limitations. Yes, you can bring a lawsuit against the driver.
Sure.
And get a piece of paper saying you're entitled to $100,000, but if you didn't have money for insurance and doesn't seem like the straight and narrow kind of guy, I think you're going to spend way too much money and cost to get a piece of paper for something you're never going to see.
Right. And I think it's people have perceptions around, oh, they look like an elderly couple, or they were driving a really nice car. That means absolutely
nothing at all.
Nothing. You have to protect yourself, because I've seen cases where people were driving very expensive cars with very low limits. And sometimes elderly people, they're on fixed budgets. People always just assume elderly people have really good policies, but it's not true. That's a myth.
I had a client who had 4 very nice vehicles on his policy. And I got his policy, and he had 10,000 BI, and he owns his pretty big business.
Oh gosh.
10,000 BI and 0 UM.
Oof.
And I said, client,
what are
you doing? He goes, I told my insurance agent to give me what I needed. Yeah. And so they gave him what he needed for the law.
They gave him full coverage.
Yeah. So,
which is fully inadequate, I would say.
That's what I told him. I said that you got to come in. We're always happy.
Oh, for sure.
To review anybody's policy to make sure, or to give them guidance that they're protected. Them and their family are protected.
Right. It's not necessarily a myth, but if I had to add to the thing that drives me crazy is clients that we counsel on this issue, and we explain to them to do that, and then they get in another accident and they come back and they didn't listen.
Yes.
Don't be that person.
Yes.
Listen. You never know when you're going to need it, and you never know how serious the injury is going to be. We can't predict those kinds of things when accidents happen, so you just have to protect yourself.
No, you can be the safest driver and still get severely injured because somebody else isn't.
Yep. So don't be that person. Heed the advice and the warning. Check your policy today and try to add that coverage. Now, you mentioned PIP when we talked about full coverage. And so there's another name for it, is Florida's no-fault law, which I think confuses a lot of people in this state. Are you able to explain that in plain English and kind of break it down? What does Florida no-fault or PIP law actually mean?
Well, it is surprising how many people come to us and say, well, it's a no-fault state, so therefore they have to pay for my damages.
Right.
Just the opposite, quite honestly.
That's actually what it doesn't mean. Yeah.
That's right. What the no-fault insurance law says is that what we're going to do, we're going to make you buy no fault or personal injury protection coverage, which will pay for your medical care and or your lost wages up to a portion of it, up to $10,000. Not worrying about who caused the accident. It doesn't matter whose fault it was. Your insurance has to pay up to $10,000 of a portion of the medical records, medical expenses, 80% of the medical records, medical expenses, or 60% of the lost wages combined up to $10,000.
Right.
But that's all that no fault means is that whether you caused the accident or you didn't cause the accident, your insurance pays it.
Absolutely.
And then it gets even crazier when somebody else's no fault pays, even though they weren't in the car.
Right. That's true. And a lot of people also don't realize that comes even before health insurance. So people just assume that, I've got health insurance, I don't have to get my auto insurance involved for this. But that's absolutely not true, because your health insurance will not pay until they know that those benefits have been exhausted. And so you can't circumvent that and say, I'm not going to make a claim under my insurance. I don't want my premiums to go up. I'll just use my health insurance.
True.
Unfortunately, that won't work. And it doesn't mean that the health insurance won't pay initially, but once they realize it's auto related, then you may have a problem getting any future payments for that.
And the primary care doctors don't really want to get involved in auto cases.
Exactly.
It's a whole different type of billing. It's a whole different type of note taking that they most of them aren't set up to do. And so they say, nope, it's an auto accident. I can't help you.
Right. Which is kind of why you need guidance from attorneys like us to kind of help you understand which providers and carriers are familiar with the insurance and the providers that are going to actually understand how to bill it properly according to the statute, because there's all kinds of forms and paperwork that go into that. And you want to make sure those bills are being paid and that those benefits are being paid properly.
Right. I get a little perturbed when people say, well, your attorney sent you to that doctor.
Oh, yeah.
You know, and it's like, no, we sent them to someone who can provide them the care that they need while utilizing the benefits that they paid for.
Yeah, properly coordinate those benefits.
And if the client didn't know who to go to, they're turning to us for advice and guidance.
That's what they hired us for.
That's what we do, you know. And so I guess that's another one of my pet peeves.
And grind your gears.
Yeah, that's right.
All right, I have a true or false question. Ready?
Uh-oh.
All right, true or false? Insurance companies always have your best interests in mind.
Absolutely false.
What do you mean? I thought it was like a good neighbor. State Farm is
You're
there.
in good hands with the you-know-who.
Are you saying that's not true?
They're a business.
Yeah.
They have shareholders that they have to answer to.
Right.
And so their job is to pay as little as possible to maximize the profits.
Their bottom line, yeah.
So they can have more shareholders.
For sure.
So they're in the business of making and saving money.
Right.
And the way to do that is to pay as little as possible.
Right. And I've always known that, but I remember having a conversation towards the end of the year. I was talking to someone who works as an insurance claims adjuster, and they were talking about kind of like their holiday end of year bonus situation. And I knew it, but then just to hear them say it, I was like, oh my gosh, how the claims are paid or denied factors into their bonuses.
Right,
and I'm like,
crazy.
Oh my God, what a horrible business model. Deny the claims, they can get back bigger bonuses. So
deny, defend, and then investigate is really what happens.
So that's a huge false, unfortunately. In a perfect world, we think that we pay our premiums. We are there insured, that they're going to look out for us and our interests, but unfortunately that's not the case.
It's a contract.
Mm-hmm.
It's two parties to the contract. You lived up to your end of the contract by paying your premiums. It's only fair to force the insurance company to live up to their end of the contract.
Absolutely.
Otherwise, it's a breach of contract. And it just drives me crazy sometimes when clients say, well, I don't want to make a claim under my auto policy. Then why are you paying premiums?
Yeah, but they want to take your money every month.
Yes.
So, all right, here's another one. In one word.
I'm ready.
Get your fingers ready. One word.
I can do that on one hand.
Here's the question. Lawyers are fill in the blank. I'm trying to say
you got that big blind ready? No.
Personal.
Good
Yeah, get the dump button. Get the dump button ready. And let's change it to personal injury lawyers. Personal injury lawyers are, I think I have one in mind, but you tell me what you think.
I would say personal injury lawyers are resources.
Yeah.
I think
Absolutely.
it's important that we are available to answer questions and to guide. We may not always get justice for the person, but we can always answer the questions and give guidance to someone who is lost.
Yeah,
they don't know, and they also don't have a voice in the legal system.
Right.
So I guess lawyers, I may steal yours, sorry.
No.
Lawyers are voices,
Yes.
What was yours?
I think you mentioned, I'll tell you in a second, but before I forget, I think you mentioned on another show, it may have been just last week, how this process is a maze. And it's so confusing. If you get dropped in the middle of a labyrinth or a maze, you just don't know how to get out. And so you need people like lawyers to help guide you through that, because we've been through it and we know how the system works, and we can get you out on the other side.
Yeah, I went to Mammoth Cave a little while ago.
Oh yeah,
and it was I kind of felt like the guide was the lawyer, because he had that little mind. He knew when to turn on the light. He knew which way to go and to get us out of the cave.
Right.
And that's kind of what lawyers do.
Absolutely.
Someone's thrown into the legal process because somebody else's negligence.
Yep.
And the lawyers are there to guide them, but to put the miner's cap on.
We put the light on and lead you out. So mine was going to be, lawyers are, one word, creative. I don't think people realize that. I think of creative professions, artists, musicians, but we have to sometimes get very creative when it comes to advocacy, I think. You have to think outside the box, and you have to be willing to, have a little bit of zeal. And a lot of times you can be successful, I think, as an attorney when you just think a little bit outside of the box.
That's great. In all my years, I never thought of that, but that is,
you got to get creative.
You have to be creative, because not every case fits into the model.
There's
in fact,
no
two cases fit into the same model.
Absolutely.
So you do have to be creative. You have to listen to, I think. Our clients.
Yeah, for sure.
They may just be talking to you, and they're not knowing what they're saying is going to be so helpful in the case.
Mm-hmm.
And so you have to listen to see what they're saying, and whether or not they may not be asking you a question by saying it, but they are in fact asking you a question.
Right. And I was actually sharing that with a client not too long ago, that the more you say, the more it gives me in terms of knowing how to help you. But when you don't share things with me and you don't necessarily tell me everything up front, then it puts me more on the defense. And you don't ever really want your attorney to be in the dark and having to then defend the punches as they're coming at you. So, but I think you're right. We have to kind of listen and then glean from what the clients are telling us. And the more they tell us, the more, prepared we are.
Right. Yeah, that's good. Creative.
Yeah, that's my word. I'm sticking to it.
I'm going to tell my son that I'm creative. I think he'll laugh at me, but
creative profession. All right, so here's another one. And I think these are both equally problematic in the cases that we can have at times. But what do you think is worse? Is when you have a client that has exaggerated things or has left out information? Which you think could be worse for a personal injury case?
They're both bad.
Yeah.
They both make me cringe.
They're both emissions.
But now exaggeration, we could think it's an exaggeration.
Right.
I'm in so much pain.
Yeah. It's a 12 out of 10.
Yeah.
On the pain scale.
And that's hard to really quantify.
Yeah.
So exaggeration may be what we think is an exaggeration, but it may be their reality.
Yeah, it's subjective.
And so I think exaggerations do hurt because the other side will try to blow it up.
Yeah.
But if you leave things out, people, juries, defense attorneys, insurance adjusters are always thinking that somebody's not telling the truth.
Sure.
Too much TV, too much court TV. They always think somebody's not telling the truth. And so they look at the plaintiff to find out where are they not telling the truth.
Yeah.
And if you give
Absolutely.
them an opportunity by leaving something out, whether it's a doctor or whether it's an accident that you didn't think was
You
a
forgot about.
significant accident, I think that could really hurt the case.
Yeah, I think I have to agree with you there. Things that are left out and then later discovered, it has that Perry Mason moment almost
Right.
like, oh, there's a smoking gun. And again, you never want your attorney to be on the other side of that. The more your attorney knows, the better and easier it is for us to be able to address that issue. If we're finding out about it at the same time as the other side, that's never a good thing. Or after, right?
You know, and sometimes they leave it out not on purpose.
Yeah.
They just didn't think it was.
Not everyone's the best historian.
You know, and that's why I think one of our roles as their attorney is to look through their medical records, see where where they may have written prior accidents or prior hospitalizations or even prior treatment. And then we ask them what that's about.
Yep.
You know, and
then you get creative.
yeah, and it's proper preparation, you know.
That's what it is, yeah.
Because the client may have forgotten about a trip and fall at home.
Exactly.
Okay, it wasn't a claim, it wasn't anything, but it was a trip and fall at home where they hurt their ankle and they got medical treatment. Well, now they have an ankle injury. And so the question may be, have you filed any claims for injuries? The answer may be no.
Right.
But it also could be, yes, you filed for health insurance for that ankle injury. So it's just really preparing the clients and understanding. And as you were saying, Jacqlyn, is, you know, listening to the client and having them feed you with information so you can then talk about the importance of all those things.
And it can prepare you in the best possible way.
Right. I think that's important. So exaggerating, you never want to exaggerate. But there is a fine line between what we think is reality and what our clients may think is reality. I think sometimes defense attorneys get a little jaded, or insurance adjusters get a little jaded, and they think everybody's faking when in essence that's far from the case.
Right. But they're looking for it.
Yeah, they're looking for it, and they're saying, well, gosh, if I had that injury, I wouldn't have that. Well, you don't be fortunate you don't have that injury, so you don't have to go through it.
Yeah. So that brings me to my next question then, because exaggerations and omissions can sometimes be discovered when there's surveillance footage, right?
Yes.
Or security cameras or some sort of video, even nowadays, dash cam. And so in your experience as a personal injury attorney, is there anything or case that comes to mind where the security footage or the surveillance camera either saved the day or destroyed the case?
Yes. In fact, I have two. One not a long time ago, but probably, gosh, maybe it was a long time ago, 10, 15 years ago. And another one that we just recently settled the case. One was in Walmart. Our client exited the bathroom, and as she exited the bathroom, she slipped on water. And so the security footage, we don't call them surveillance footage because surveillance isn't
depending on the case law.
Yeah.
Right? Dodson versus Purnell.
See, she's much smarter than I am. I don't know the case law. But the Walmart was saying, well, gosh, we have security footage showing that the guy spilled the water just 2.5 minutes before the client left.
Right. So there's no way we could have possibly been able to.
And that was their argument the whole time. And sure enough, the security footage did show that he spilled it 2.5 minutes before our client fell.
Right.
But it also showed a manager walking through that area, two other employees walking through that area, all these people that are on their duty is to make sure that the area is safe.
Now, one of those stores, I'm not sure if it's that one, but they even have paper towels in their back pocket.
This one
their
did.
Policy.
Yes.
And you are supposed to be looking at those floors and cleaning up those messes.
That was that case. Yeah. I mean, that would happen there because he testified that he did have paper towels. And if he saw it, he would have cleaned it.
They're supposed to clean it up. Yeah.
Exactly right. Then a more recent one was a grocery store. Where
it went well, or did it go?
It went well.
Okay, good.
Yeah, it went well because there was water on the floor. There was an employee stocking the produce,
Mm-hmm.
and he was standing right there,
Mm-hmm.
and we think he's the one who caused the water to be there. We couldn't
Yeah.
prove that, but we did establish that he was there long enough to know that the liquid and should have been cleaned up.
Yep, for
And
sure.
So those two security footages really help.
Yeah, I had one like that as well, where there was a gentleman who I want to say at least a half an hour stalking, and was just a few feet away from the area. Very nice gentleman, because you could tell in the video he went and got him a chair. He helped him out, but it's like, you were there half an hour on that aisle. He walked up and down, putting things on the shelf, and never cleaned and it was he even testified it was a pretty good sized puddle, but just didn't notice it. And so that's when, like you said, the store footage can save the day.
Right. And nowadays with dash cams,
Mm-hmm.
it's a whole new area of discovery and such
For
like
sure,
that.
for sure.
I had a case where she had a back cam, I guess. I don't think you call it dash cam, but a rear camera.
Mm-hmm.
And it just showed this moving truck just not stopping,
plowing
into the vehicle that was behind her.
Mm.
And then it showed the middle vehicle just going up and hitting the rear of our client as well. So it was like, it was quite impressive footage that the insurance company did not like to see. And
I've said it time and time again, get one of those, because they're becoming more and more useful. And not just in liability disputes, but like you said, the impact can really go to the issue of causation.
Right.
Because sometimes you don't always see a big crumpled up bumper. The car's not an accordion. There's no rollover, accident. But that actual impact can be seen on the video. And sometimes I think that is pretty compelling, even when there's just, maybe paint transfer or whatnot on the bumper.
Well, and cars are designed nowadays to look pretty after a crash, and at what expense? Right. Unfortunately, the force has to get absorbed someplace. And if it's not the bumper crunching, it's going to be the occupants absorbing that force.
Exactly. So I have one last question for you before we'll take a short break. We'll have a commercial, and then we'll come back and wrap the show up. But what is one of the biggest mistakes you see people make after a car crash?
The biggest mistake, I would say, is not treating. Yeah. Hoping that it goes away. Yeah. And then if you wait, I agree with that. Yeah. If you wait 2, 3, 4 days, the insurance company's going to say, how do we know something didn't happen within those 4 days? Yeah. If they were really hurting, they would have treated with the doctor. Yeah. And I'm just as bad. I would be. Oh,
I'm guilty. I'll raise my hand.
I would be that person who said, I'm just going to let it wait. I'm just going to let it wait. But
don't be like Matt or I.
Yeah. But I think that is really what does hurt.
I think so
hurt the case, And if you wait 14 days, all that money that you paid for PIP,
you've now lost your PIP benefits.
You can't use those benefits. Yeah. And so I think it's always important that you at least get checked out, whether it's a walk-in. You don't have to go to the emergency room.
I agree.
But if you go to a walk-in clinic, or even your family doctor, if they'll see you after a car accident.
If they'll see you, or a chiropractor.
Yeah, or a chiro. Sure. I think that's important to do. Just get checked out.
Absolutely.
The best case scenario is that everything's fine. And really, that's the purpose of the no-fault law, was to prevent people having to sue the at-fault driver if there's just a few $100s or a few $1,000s in medical.
Right.
So.
Well, Matt, I thank you so much for joining me today and being in the hot seat. I know you have to take off.
I do have to take off. I have to go to a pitching lesson for my son. So
I hope that goes well.
Me too.
But of course, thank you as always. And of course, I think you'll be back next week.
I will be next week.
You have a special guest, right?
I think it may be Lori Robinson. I don't think she knows that yet.
Okay. All right. Well, you can tune in next week to get Matt back, but we'll take a short break, and then I'll wrap up the show here with you.
Thank you very much.
All right.
This is the Tan Talk Radio Network.
After a car accident, there are many questions that you need answers to. Who pays for my car repairs? Who pays for the medical bills? What about my lost wages? And more. The personal injury law firm of Perenich, Caulfield, Avril Noyes has been answering these questions for their clients for nearly 70 years. Since 1955, they've been a voice of the injured in the legal system. As one of the longest established law firms in Tampa Bay, Perenich, Caulfield, Avril Noyes is here to answer your questions. Listen to their live call-in radio show on this channel every Tuesday evening from 5 to 6 p.m. or call them at 727-796-8282 or visit them at voiceoftheinjured.com. Offices Clearwater, non-attorney spokesperson.
This is the Tan Talk Radio Network.
And we are back with FLALAW live on the radio. We're back from our quick commercial break, and hopefully you were tuned in with my partner, Matthew Noyes, who was answering some questions about personal injury law, and I kind of had him in the hot seat because he's usually the host, but today he was my guest, and he was answering a lot of questions that I thought were quite interesting in regards to personal injury law and auto accident cases and so forth. But I didn't get a chance to really touch on any of the workers' comp type questions with him. So I'm going to answer those questions tonight in terms of the list of workers' comp. I think there's a lot of interesting questions we could really get into when it comes to workers' comp, because that system is a maze in and of itself. Just the way there's so many hurdles and hoops that you have to really go through in the workers' comp system when you get hurt on the job. And so Matt has been doing workers' comp for many, many years. And so I had some of those questions on the list for him, but unfortunately we didn't get to those. So I am going to tackle a few of those with you before we close out the show tonight. But as you know, we are still taking calls or comments. So if you have any questions about what we talked about so far, or something that comes up as we're talking, feel free to give us a call, 727-441-3000. The lines are still open. Give us a call before 6 o'clock, and we'll definitely get that question answered live on the air. So getting into some of the workers' comp questions that we did not get a chance to talk to Matt about, but I'm happy to go over with you tonight, is here's one. How soon after a workplace injury should someone call an attorney, and what happens if you wait too long? I thought it was a really good question, because a lot of people don't necessarily realize that there is a reporting requirement under the workers' comp system that requires you to report a work injury within the first 30 days. So some people might assume that, workers' comp injuries are like car accidents or slip and falls. If you have a slip and fall on the job, they might assume that it's just like a slip and fall at a grocery store, that you have a 2-year statute of limitation in order to bring that case. And that's absolutely not true. Yes, you've got a statute of limitations that pertains to the case, but in terms of actually reporting it and notifying your employer about it and telling them that this actually happened, you only have 30 days to do that. So yes, if you report it in a timely manner, then you do have a secondary 2-year statute of limitations, but you have to report it timely first. And if you don't timely report it, then you could be out of luck when it comes to a workers' comp accident. And so what constitutes reporting? That would be obviously telling your employer, your supervisor, your manager, having something in writing, sending an email or a text to prove, that you said something to someone about being hurt. Of course, going to the doctor, getting a doctor's note, letting someone know that you were hurt on the job. As long as you do something like that within the first 30 days, then you should be okay. But if you wait too long and you wait more than a month to go and tell your employer that something happened, sometimes you're on the job, you get hurt, and there's nobody around. You don't have a coworker there who can vouch for you and say, oh yeah, I saw that happen, or I was with her when she fell. And you don't tell anybody, and you just go home and you kind of nurse yourself for a while. It progressively gets worse. You never call a lawyer. You never report it to your job. And now here we are months down the line, and now you want to open up the case. Well, if you didn't tell your employer about it within the first 13 days, with the first 30 days, then you could be barred from actually bringing any type of workers' comp claim at all. So it can be a situation where you've waited too long. Another situation with workers' comp is the time you have to treat and see the doctor. So let's say you did timely report your claim. You did go see the workers' comp doctor. They did provide you treatment and you were doing okay for a while. And then slowly, progressively, the pain starts to come back. Well, if you let a whole year go by and you don't see a doctor and you don't go back and ask for them to schedule you a new appointment, and you ultimately don't follow up with any kind of a doctor or medical treatment for a whole year, then that could bar your claim as well. And if you wait more than that time period to call an attorney to assist you with getting authorization, then you could unfortunately be out of luck when it comes to being able to continue on with your case. So you might have met the first threshold by reporting it in a timely way and going to see the doctors, but then you let so much time go by, more than a year, and then you weren't able to keep the case open. So a lot of people I've seen that happen where they ultimately had a case in the beginning and then the employer stopped providing a doctor, or the work comp carrier adjuster, wasn't responding and they didn't get an appointment scheduled. And then a whole year went by and now they're asking the attorney, can you help me? They're not responding to me. They're not giving me my doctor. I need to see a doctor and they're not responding. Well, by then so much time has now passed that unfortunately it's too late. So that can happen. You don't want to wait too long when it comes to workers' comp cases because it can have a very detrimental impact on your case. And so another question that I was going to ask, but that I'm going to tackle for you as well is, have you ever had a workers' comp case where the client didn't even know they were entitled to benefits? And I'm actually glad that I'm answering this question because I absolutely did have a situation like this before where there was a client that I had who drove trucks. He was a truck driver that drove long range all around the country. And he had a work injury, did not have health insurance through his employer, and was not a wealthy gentleman, didn't have the money to go out and pay for treatment on his own. And he got hurt on the job. He, I think, fell down some stairs at the loading dock, when he was getting in, loading up his truck. And he did call and report it. So we had that. We had timely reporting. But his boss called him the next morning and said, hey, what are you going to do? You going to go to the doctor? And never once did his boss say, hey, this is work comp. We're going to get it set up. I'll have the adjuster call you. Don't worry about it. We'll send you to the doctor and we'll get all that set up for you. Somebody will call you. And he just asked him, hey, are you going to go to the doctor? What are you going to do? And so my client, unfortunately, not realizing that there is workers' comp, he thought that he was going to have to foot the bill for that. And he's like, oh, well, I guess I can go to the doctor. But he didn't have health insurance and he didn't have the money to pay for a huge emergency room bill. So he didn't go because he was never told by his boss that he was able to go treat under the workers' comp system. There was zero explanation to him about the fact that, yes, you are entitled to medical treatment and lost wages under the workers' comp system. And we have to provide you with the doctor. And here's the authorized treating physician that you're supposed to go see. All those things are supposed to happen. But because his boss never talked to him about any of that and almost made it seem as though he's the one that has to go out and do all these things, he didn't realize that he was even entitled to workers' comp benefits. And sadly, by the time he came to us, that was the main defense that they were raising, is that, oh, well, there was no accident, there was no treatment, he didn't properly report it. They were raising all these defenses because, unfortunately, my client just didn't even know that he had those rights. And we were able to, fortunately, get the case resolved for him. But, it was very, very difficult because of that scenario. So If you don't know your rights, you're not sure what to do, after a work accident, then you should absolutely be calling a workers' comp attorney like us, because there's so many different nuances as to when you get care, when you should get treatment, what they're supposed to provide, and how it's supposed to be done. So that's something I absolutely recommend whenever you are facing a situation where you're not really sure, do I get a doctor? Do I have to pay for it? Those are the things that you should be calling an attorney about. So here's another workers' comp type related question as we get ready to wrap up the show this evening. And that is, what's one thing you wish every Florida worker knew before they ever got hurt on the job? And so my opinion on this, what I wish everybody knew about workers' comp, is that you don't really have any control on who you get to see, unfortunately, in terms of the medical providers. A lot of people do not realize that this system is very controlled, in the sense that you do not get to pick who you go see or how often you go see them. And a lot of times it's very much dictated for you. And so when the system begins, they assign the physician. Some people think of it as like a company doctor, not necessarily a company doctor, because the doctor doesn't work for the company, but the carrier picks provider. So if you have a specialist in mind, or your primary care doctor wants to give you a referral, you can't do it under the workers' comp system, surprisingly. I think a lot of people are a little bit surprised by that, or they think there's some way around it. Like, yeah, I went to their doctor, but can I go see my doctor now? Because my doctor has a different opinion from that doctor. Nope. Your doctor's opinions are inadmissible in a workers' comp case, because they are not an authorized treating physician, believe it or not. And so I think a lot of people are very taken aback by that. I'm like, what do you mean? My doctor's been treating me for 20 years, and that doctor says something completely different from my doctor. Why can't the judge look at that and try to assess which opinion makes more sense based on my medical history? Sadly, that's not the way the workers' comp laws work. And it says that you either have to be an authorized treating physician, an independent medical examiner, or an EMA doctor, which is basically a doctor appointed by a judge, in order to be able to have the opinions be admissible in a workers' comp case. So very tricky system. And it's something that you absolutely need assistance with when you get hurt on the job. And so that's what we can obviously help you with. But those were the couple of workers' comp questions that I would have gone over with Matt, but I'm glad he joined me tonight, and I was glad I was able to answer those for you this evening. Thanks so much for joining us. As always, this has been FLA Law live on the radio. As I said before, Matthew Noyes will be back here next week at Tuesday at 5 o'clock. So we would appreciate it if you come back and listen to us again next week at Tuesday at 5. Thanks, folks. And this has been FLA Law live on the radio.